Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Learn with Dr. G. That's me. Today, we are going to be continuing on our journey through Git and collaborative code development and things like that. And I'm really excited for it. So we will be following along in this module here, which is the Collaborate with Git Learn module. So if you want to check that one out and follow along as we do it together, feel free to do that. And yeah, we'll get started here in just a second. All right. As always, I want to remind you all of our code of conduct here at Microsoft. Basically, it just says, please, let's be kind to each other. I'll be kind to you. You be kind to me. Be kind to each other. We're here to learn and explore and have fun together. All right. So if you missed any of our previous Learn journey through the What You Didn't Learn in School mini-series, you can find all the episodes at aka.ms/learnwithdrg/videos. These are, oh, sorry, I intended to grab this as something I can copy and paste so I can place it in the comments. Hello to Colombia. ¿Cómo estás? Gracias por venir. This is where I'm putting a playlist of all of the previous videos. We have live streams, which are all about an hour long. And then I do recap videos sometimes of some of the concepts that are closer to 15 to 20 minutes or 10 to 20 minutes to try to kind of bring in everything that we're doing. All right. Also, please feel free to engage in the chat. Unfortunately, I have not figured out the way to put it up next to me yet. I know how, but with StreamYard, it gets a little complicated. But I will show chats up here and read them out. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on this Learn module. So like I said, this is the Collaborate with Git Learn module. And today what we're really going to be talking about is how you would go about using Git when you're working with other people. In future episodes, we will be talking about using GitHub. This is not using GitHub. The biggest difference between that is GitHub is basically that online server where all of your stuff is stored, and they add some additional features for you, which are pretty sweet. But today we're just going to be doing kind of a local environment version of Git and kind of simulating what it would be like if you were hosting your code on your own kind of server, like your computer, and people might be connecting to it. All right. Let me try to zoom in just slightly more. There we go. That's a little bit better. So we're going to be showing how to clone a repository, how to make a pull request, and we'll talk about what pull requests are, how to stash changes, and how to push changes. All right. And I will be monitoring chats as always. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and get started with this one. I'm going to jump straight into the exercise. As with the last live stream last week, we're going to be using the sandbox within Microsoft Learn. Now, if you do head to my playlist, the Learn with Dr. G /WYDLIS_videos. I've been saying that a lot lately. I do show it using WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux, basically an Ubuntu terminal that you can use on Windows. So I do show kind of the exact same thing we did last week, but on your local Windows machine using Bash. And so it would be the same on Mac or Windows. But today we're going to be activating a sandbox. The sandboxes are really useful because you get to use everything just right here directly in the browser. Again, the module that we're following is at aka.ms/learnwithdrg/collaborate-with-git. All right. So the sandbox, like I said, you get 20 sandboxes that you can use for 2 hours a day. So you can see that I did test this out before the stream. As always, just in case, you always want to test your demos. Of course, something still could go wrong, but just in case. And so I've used 2 of 20 of my sandboxes, and I've got about 2 hours left. All right. So this is really great resource because you get this Azure Cloud Shell right here. You get to use the shell right here in your browser. And we're going to be able to do all of the same Git commands that you would do on your local machine. Basically repeating the same thing twice because waiting for this to connect to a terminal. Perfect. If you do have any questions about using terminals and things like that, I do have future episodes where we're going to be talking about Bash and PowerShell and other things. And like I said, in future episodes, we'll talk about GitHub, but I'm happy to explain things as I'm doing. Someone is asking in Spanish, what are we talking about? We're talking about using Git. Estamos hablando de cómo usar Git para colaborar en programas de código. Mi español no es perfecto, pero estoy practicando. Hello to Spain. I am thinking of doing some Spanish-only streams in the future, though. I'm thinking Friday mornings, so I'll let you know if you want. You can follow along on Twitter. I'm at Dr. Guthels, and that's when I will. Wow, that's pasted twice. Okay. Oh no, it's not. I'm at Dr. Guthels on Twitter, so you can follow me there, and I'll announce when I'll do some streams in Spanish. Okay, con Git, not GitHub. So like I said, GitHub, basically you can store your code up onto GitHub's servers, and so anyone can access it, given permissions are set properly. This is using Git, which is kind of what's underneath GitHub and what is driving those interactions of tracking files, comparing files, doing those diffs, all of that. So that exists separate from GitHub. You can use them completely separate from GitHub. When you integrate them with GitHub, that's when you get kind of all of those additional features. Oh, gracias. Can I use the Microsoft Translator for it? Good question. I have not tried to do it, but that could be fun. That could be fun to try. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is do mkdir cats, and this is make directory, make dir directory cats. And a directory is basically a folder, so you're basically creating a new folder called cats. If we were to do ls here, list, that will tell us what is in our current folder. So for example, cats, and then we also have this cloud drive, but we're not going to worry about that. And then if you do cd cats, that is basically saying change directory. So double clicking into a folder. And now you can see that we were first just at home. Home is represented with this tilde. And now we're at home/cats. So this would look the same as if you opened a file explorer and you were to see kind of the path of where you are. It's kind of, that's what it is here. You can actually see the full path by doing pwd. So we're in home, the user Sarah, and in the folder cats. What is the best Git CLI tool for Windows? Yes, actually, we did get this question last time, and I intended to do it. We're actually going to be talking about that in a future episode, but I did intend to have the right answer for it. When I'm on Windows and I just want to use Git, which is kind of rare because I'm typically using GitHub, in which case I'm typically using an integration with like Visual Studio Code or something like that. But if I am just using Git, I will simply just use the command line. So on Windows, I prefer using WSL with Ubuntu, and I have that right here. So for example, here's my Ubuntu terminal, and same kind of thing here. We can zoom in and do, and then we can do like make directory cats, oops, make directory cats, cd cats, ls, nothing in here. And this is where I am on my local machine. It's a mounted drive because this is using WSL, which is that subsystem for Linux. So it's not exactly PowerShell. So that's what I tend to use. And yes, thank you, Andrew. Scott Hanselman actually has some blogs and video sessions that talk about WSL, which are really, really great. So I highly recommend those. And again, we will have a bunch of sessions in this series, What You Didn't Learn in School, coming up on that. So if you want to check those out, you can just go to aka.ms/learnwithdrg/WY DLIS_videos. So much for a short link. And that's where I'll post all of the videos as we make them. Alternatively, if you are using something like Visual Studio Code, their Git integration there is pretty great. I think I've got, if I can just, this one's from what I was using it to start things. You can actually see their source code integration right here. I was using this from within WSL, but you can see that it's got the stage changes, the current changes, and then you can put in commit messages and things like that. And then it's got the branching right here with your main branch. So that integration is pretty awesome. I like it. Yes, Scott Hanselman and I introduced this mini series of what you didn't learn in school on that playlist, so you can check that out. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to initialize Git in this folder. So Git init is basically telling this folder or letting Git know that this folder is now considered a repository, a Git repository. What this ends up doing is it creates this .git folder. So you can see it initialized an empty Git repo in this. So it's this .git folder here. You never really have to worry about that. It's just that's where all of this information is going to be stored. All right. The next thing that we need to do is configure our username and configure our email. And the reason we do this, which you should use your actual username and email, is because when we create what are called commits, which you can revisit the last couple videos on that, which is basically we're telling Git this version of our code we want to store. When you're creating those commits or pushing things, what you want to do is know who is making those changes, because when you're collaborating with other people, if there's a change that caused a break or that you might be confused about, and you're working with even just 2 other people, you want to know who to go to ask about that change. And then we will actually be showing this when we set the username and email for the other people that we're going to simulate within this stream. Yes, once upon a time in a different universe, we would have been learning Team Foundation Server. Yes. Fun fact, when I used to work at GitHub, I worked with the Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code team when they were still using, well, mainly the Visual Studio, when they were still using TFS. And it was interesting to figure out how to integrate between the two and try to partner up, because my team at GitHub built the integration for GitHub into Visual Studio. All right. Excuse me. So the next thing that we're going to do is the same from the last stream. So forgive me if I'm going to go a little fast here, but I'm going to create a new file called index.html. I'm using touch command for that. So that's basically we'll update the index for index.html, or just create a new file if it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist yet. So now we have index.html. I'm going to make a directory called CSS. And then I'm going to make a new file inside of CSS called site.css. In the last stream, I did accidentally have my CSS folder not be capitalized. It doesn't technically matter whether you capitalize it or not. What matters, though, is when you're doing Git commands, you're using Git commands, you stick with the same capitalization that you use. So I'm going to stick with the same one as in the tutorial, just so I don't cause that confusion. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say git add dot. And so what this is doing is telling Git that all of the newly created files, modified files, or deleted files, we want to make sure that Git is knowing that those are things, that those are ones that we're going to want to include in our commit. So it's basically what's called staging them. It's letting them know hey, this is something that we want to include. And then we're going to create a commit. So here there is actually a typo in this module that we are in the process of fixing. This one says git commit index.html-m, but then the message actually says create empty index.html and site.css file. The issue is that if we say git commit index.html, that is only committing index.html, not the site.css file. So instead, we can either do a -a, or my preference is do -am, which is what we're going to do. So you say -am, which is, well, technically we don't have to do any of that because, sorry. So if you just did a git add, you don't have to include the A because you just added them for staging. My default is to always say git commit -am because in case for some reason I forgot to do an add and I made a slight little change, I always want to include the A. That is just my personal preference. I almost always want to include all of my changes to my commit. There's very rarely do I want to include only some of my changes. If I want to do that, I'll usually do a different branch, which we'll talk about in future stream. So in this case, since we did a git add, you can just do a -m and you don't have to specify anything else. I'm going to do a -am just because that's how I like to do it. So create empty index.html and site.css files. Okay, so what we've done so far is we have created one commit with this message, create empty index.html and CSS files. And this is the hash for that commit. And that commit is currently the most recent. So that's head commit for the master branch or the main branch. Someone just asked, what does the dot mean for git add and then the space dot? So dot is saying everything in this current folder and therefore kind of like everything else, everything. And it's anything that has been added, deleted, or modified. You can actually see this. There was a good doc that I'll share with y'all in the chat. Let me bring it up first. It's just looking at, hang on. There was one that had a really great, should you use -a or not? Well, here's one that we can look at. Let me get this URL in the chat here that you can also visit it later. Oops. There we go. Okay, so basically you can do Git Add Path. So that's going to stage that specific directory or file. That's where you can say git add index.html or git add star.html. So all of the things that are in HTML. Dot, which is all files that are not listed in .git ignore, which we talked about in the last stream. And then -p, which is something that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here, but you can read about it. So either a specific path or file, or the dot, which is kind of all of the above. There's also git add -a, which you can find on the official Git docs. And these ones show right here. Where did we go? -a. Here we go. So -A, you can read more about all of that. So not only when the working tree has a matching file path, but just anything that already has an entry. So if you've already added it in the past, it's just kind of all bring everything in. Somebody else asked, what's the difference between the AM and M flag? It's a great question. So M the M flag -M, that is just specifying that the next thing is going to be the message. So if you had -A, the next thing is the message that is associated with that commit. We talked about this in the last one, but you should always have real messages, not just things that are like update, 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 small change, small change. Specify what they are because that's going to help us know what we should do next. You can say git commit. So there's kind of like 3 ways that you can do it. Git commit -A. If you don't like git commit -A -M. And then the message that you can just kind of separate them. But the nice thing about the git commands flags is you can add them, like string them all together if they don't have anything else that's coming after them. If you just did -M, then you hope that, if you just did -M, it'll only commit the things that you did a git add to previously. So if you did git add and then you made some additional changes and then you did git commit without the -A, it's not going to include those. So I always prefer to just do -AM. That way I'm making sure I include everything. And then someone's getting an error. Who are you? I don't know which command you're running when you're getting that error. If you want to let me know, we can help you fix that. Okay, so let's get to the point where we have another person supposedly inside of our world here. We're doing a pretend one, but we're just going to copy and paste this HTML code, and then we're going to copy and paste this CSS code. Oops. Paste. Nope. Copy, paste, save, quit. So now we've got 2 changes. You can see that CSS, site.css and index.html were both modified. And we can do our git commit -AM, add simple HTML and style sheet. All the same types of things that we did last time. So we can check out the log. And we can see that now we've got 2 commits. The one from before, where we created the empty ones, and then the current one, which is currently at head in our main branch, and it's adding the simple one. All right. Now we're going to pretend like we have another person, Alice. So remember, right now, this is where we're at. We've up-leveled from cats folder or directory. We did that by doing this cd ... This one right here. ... is the folder that's above me. So my like parent folder, parent directory. So cd ... is change directory. Let's move up a folder. Now we're just in home Sarah. And I'm going to make a new directory called Alice. I always put alive instead of Alice every single time I do this. Sí, vamos a practicar. Yo español y ustedes inglés. Va a estar muy bueno. Someone was commenting in Spanish in one of the chats. So we're going to make directory called Alice. And then I'm going to change directory into Alice. Okay, so clear, ls, nothing's in there, pwd, this is where I'm at right now. So home, Sarah, Alice. All right. Next, what we're going to do is called a clone. Clone is when you basically clone or copy a repository into a new directory. Typically, your repository is hosted on some external server. And so when you clone it, you're making a copy onto your local machine. In this instance, we're pretending that the cats repo, which is just in the next directory up, is somewhere else. And so we're cloning that. So git clone ... /cats . Let's talk about this line for a second. Git clone is the git command. This is the path to that like remote or the repository, right? So in the future episodes, when we do talk about GitHub and things like that, you will see that we will use a URL here, for example. And then dot is saying that I want you to clone all of the contents from within the cats folder into the folder that I'm currently in. So when we do this, we do not have a cats folder inside of Alice. because we grabbed all of the contents from the repository. Cats is kind of like the name of the repository. It's not in a folder within the repository. It's just kind of the name of it. So CSS folder and index.html, those are the contents of the repository. That's what we're cloning here. Yes. Don't we all need pep talks? I agree. All right. Sorry, I get distracted a little bit because I'm trying to just make sure I'm not missing anything. How do you know what branch it'll clone? Great question. There is always a main branch. Typically, like oftentimes it is called either master or main. But when you are creating that main branch, basically, there's just kind of like a default that you can say, and we can talk about that. I can take that one as like, how do you change which one is your main branch? I'm going to add that to my questions, because I do make recap videos after streams to make sure I include some of the questions. So like, how might you change what the main branch is? If you're using GitHub, there is a clear way of doing that, which I can show you all. But yeah, basically, when you clone, you're going to be cloning whatever the main branch is for that repository. You can then switch branches or like create a new branch, but in this case, you're just going to be doing that. Awesome. Welcome. What we're doing today, someone was asking, is checking out Git as part of this collaborate with Git Microsoft Learn module using the Sandbox inside of Microsoft Learn to do it. What we've done so far, just to recap, because we took a couple tangents to answer some questions. So we currently have two folders. We have cats, which has our original project, and this is what our repository is. Then we have Alice, which is our pretend person Alice, who just cloned our repository into her own folder. So now we're inside of Alice, and what we're going to do is we're going to say git pull. And that's going to just tell us already up to date, because what git pull is asking is, we know that this is referencing another repository, right? This is Alice's copy of the cats repository. So git pull is saying, hey, that repository we just cloned from, anything that's changed since the last time I either cloned or did a pull, can you send me those updates? Now, we just did a git clone. We're the only ones with access to this. And so there haven't been any changes. So git pull says, you're good. You're already up to date. You're fine. Don't worry about it. How do you reverse a commit? Good question. We actually did talk about that in the last stream. So if you want to, now I'm like questioning myself, but check out aka.ms/learnwithdrg/WYDLIS videos. Let me get that in the chat for you too. If you check out that, we do have a playlist, and the last two videos, I did a 20-minute recap where we talked about undoing commits, basically. Somebody asked, are the typical day-to-day Git commands Git pull, Git add, Git status, Git commit, Git push, rinse, repeat? Basically, yes, yes. And we'll talk about that in just 1 second. All right. So we did a Git pull, nothing's going on. Let's make sure that we know who Alice is, because if Alice does make any changes, I want to make sure that I'm able to go to her and just be like, wow, awesome, kudos. That was an awesome change, Alice. Thank you so much for contributing. Maybe even send her some swag. All right. Now Alice is ready to make some changes. She did a Git pull. She knows that her current version is up to date. Prior to making any changes, I always highly recommend doing a Git pull. If you've like done a clone or a pull and then you like left for a day, an hour, a minute, whatever, do a Git pull before you're about to do a bunch of changes. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a bunch of problems, and we'll talk about that in a future stream. But yeah, do a Git pull before you make a bunch of changes. Okay, and we're going to talk about that again in a second too. So now we're Alice, and we're going to go into the site.css file. We're going to make a change. I don't like that the body is just bare. I want it to have a background color, me as an Alice. So I've made that change. Let's go ahead and do a Git status. So we can see that Alice does have the most recent version of Origin's main branch. So Origin is where it is in that cats folder. That's like where it lives. That's the origin. That's like the main source of truth. But she does have some changes that aren't staged for commit, site.css, meaning she does need to do a git add, or she can do a git checkout to like undo those changes. So we're going to do git commit. I'm going to do my git am or -am instead of the -a-m. Change background color to light. It's going to say gray and oh no, blue. Okay. I was going to say, I can never remember if it's E or A. Do you want to like debate it? Is it E or A for gray? I don't know. I can never remember. Okay. So now if we did a git status, we can see that her branch, because even though she's on her main branch, so it's her master branch, it's still a branch because the source of truth, origin master, is like the original one. Her is this Alice -master. So her branch is ahead of the other branch by one commit, meaning she has everything that the other branch has, and she has one additional things. So if she wants to publish her commits, her changes to the main one, she has to do a push. All right. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad I'm explaining things well. There's a question. Is this referred to the everyday workflow in a professional environment? Yes. Slightly different because in a professional environment, Alice and me wouldn't be on the same machine. But yes, this is what we would actually do. Why do we have to stage before we add? Staging and adding, like when you do an add, that is staging. And it's because you might have some changes that you've made that you're not like they're broken, right? So maybe we updated the site.css file and we started adding in like a bio section to index.html, but it's not complete yet. And we haven't changed those yet. And we're not ready to like commit those yet. But someone's waiting for us for site.css. So we want, even though Git knows about index.html and site.css, we only want to include site.css in that kind of commit. And so we don't even need Git to worry about index.html. So, and it makes a little bit more sense because you can commit just like one file. It would make a little bit more sense if we had like a bunch of files except X, and we just don't want to include that one. Hey there, doing well. Yes, grab some popcorn. Oh, can you share? I want some. All right. So what we've done so far is a git commit to our branch, or Alice's branch, which is now ahead of the source of truth, which is origin. We can do a git log one line here to kind of see this a little bit more clearly. So the first commit that we did was creating that empty index. The next commit that we did inside of the cats folder was adding the simple HTML. And we can see that that's what is currently in origin. Now, this commit for Alice is on Alice's head, and it's where she changed the background with a typo in background. So now what she's going to do is a git request pull -p origin -master/master dot. Oh my gosh. What are we doing here? Okay. So, and actually now I just totally git request pull. Let me just pull up this. Oh yeah. Okay, cool. So basically what we're doing here, when I first heard the word pull request, it confused me like no other. And this is when I first started working at at GitHub many, many years ago. And I was like, what the heck is a pull request? So remember earlier when Alice was sitting in her repository and then she said git pull, because what she wanted to do was anything that had happened since she cloned, she wanted to pull those changes down into her local copy. What a pull request is Alice saying, hey, I have these changes. I don't own that remote repository. Okay. So I can't just push those to you because like that's yours. So I'm going to request that you, Cat's repo, pull my changes into your repository, right? So you're requesting that the origin pull your changes up. That may be super obvious to other people. For me, I was super confused until someone explained it to me like that. -P is just any like messages that were included or anything like that we want to include. And then origin master, that's the one that we're requesting gets pulled in, like the person we're requesting. And then dot is our current folder, right? So our current folder has our changed background color to light blue CSS file. And we're requesting anything that was in there, which is currently just that origin pull that. Okay. Yes, we talked about -A when you commit a couple of times now. I do recommend either rewinding super quick, or I do talk about it in my videos, Learn with Dr. G, WYDLIS_videos. Basically, super quick, it is making sure that we are including all of the files that we want to include. So if you do a git add dot and then git commit -m, you're good. If you don't want to do that git add dot, you can just do git commit -am. Yes. Okay. So now we are requesting that origin pull our changes in, and we get this nice little recap of what's going on. So it's going to tell us that Alice wants to make this one, is including this one commit in this pull request, that it's one file changed with one insertion and one deletion. And then it shows us this diff file. So right here is what is in origin, and we're deleting that line, and we're adding this line. Okay. So we're deleting a line and we're adding a line at line 2. All right. So now let's go back and pretend that we are ourselves over in Cat's land. So we are now in origin. We are in Cat's. And we can do a git log one line here. And we can see that we don't know anything about what Alice is talking about yet. All we know is we've made 2 commits so far, because Alice's pull request hasn't been included in our logs yet. She's just requesting that. We're not dealing with that yet. But what we can do is this. So this is saying, I want to add a remote repository. I'm going to name it Alice, and this is where you can find it. So this is basically saying that origin now knows about Alice's stuff. And now that we know that we can pull in Alice's stuff because we know about it, we can do a git pull Alice to master. So what this is doing is basically saying, hey, go ahead, let's bring Alice's stuff into master. That sounds great. It's 2 changes, 1 insertion, 1 deletion for 1 file changed, site.css. Now we can see that both us and Alice are on the same commit with this one. All right. Now what we're going to do is simulate this like server basically, or the shared repository that's like an empty repository that's just keeping track of everyone, right? So rather than Sarah inside of my Cat's folder owning everything, we're going to have basically this empty repository that's going to just know about everything and make sure that we're all up to date. So we're going to go up a directory. which means now we've got Alice and cats. This is where we are inside of the Sarah folder. And we're going to make a new directory called shared.git. It explains it here. The directory naming is not super important, but there is this tradition of assigning bare repositories, which is just the kind of the one that's keeping track of things, ending in .git, so that we know that this is not a working tree. What is a working tree? A working tree is basically a folder that actually might contain actual changes. So cats or Alice. This is just kind of the one that's keeping track of stuff. Let's go in there. We're going to do git init --bare. And is this live from Twitch? Someone is asking over on Learn TV. Yes, we're live on Learn TV, Twitch, the Microsoft Developer YouTube channel, the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel, and Learn TV's Twitter account. All right. So now we're inside of here, and we've initialized this as a bare repository. So now what we want to do is we're going to go into cats. We're going to add this shared.git like bare repository as origin. So now origin is no longer the cats folder. Origin is now shared.git, and cats is just one of the clones of that. In my experience, has everyone used Git Bash or the terminal to do Git commands? Any popular adoption of GitHub desktop software that turns commands into UI buttons, into buttons in UI interface? Very good question. I think it is definitely a personal preference. I will either use Visual Studio Code's Git integration or GitHub desktop. I am a huge, huge, huge fan of GitHub desktop, especially if I'm going to be dealing with pull requests and things like that. If I'm going to be doing something fairly simple by myself, then I will often use just the Visual Studio Code Git integration. The Visual Studio Code GitHub integration does have some support for pull requests, but that is ever evolving. But yes, I think that is a very great question. And we will talk about those in future streams. Hello, Eric. Nice to see you. Not a Git repository. So someone is getting the error, git pull, and then it's a fatal error, not a Git repository or any parent. So you might have missed either a Git init. Sorry, you might have missed a Git clone. So inside of your Alice folder, make sure that you've done your Git clone step. So that should have been over here. Nope. Inside of this clone a repo at the very bottom, first what we did was git clone with the dot. So make sure that you've done that, and then you should be able to do a git pull. Okay. So now our origin is now set to, or we're about to do that. No, we did do that. No, we haven't done that yet. There we go. Okay, we're about to do that. So let's go back into cats. So now we're just ourselves again. And we're going to say, okay, hey, everyone, I want the origin to be this bare repository. And then I want to push all of my changes that are on my main branch that's currently called master into origin, which is now set to shared.git. Okay. Doesn't change anything over here, but if we wanted to, we can see that shared.git is going to have a bunch of stuff, and one of those is going to be, I think it's inside of, nope, not yet. It's, okay. So basically, we have pushed all of our changes. So now shared.git, it's not a working tree, so you're not going to see the same file structure because that's not where we're making changes. It's just where we're kind of keeping track of what all of the changes are and what our source of truth is. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say that our upstream branch is origin master. So I'm in cats, so my folder. And I'm saying that when I say push or pull, I am talking about origin master because Before, it was just me. We didn't go anywhere. Now I'm talking about origin master, and we've already set the shared.git to be origin. All right. Let's introduce another player here. Let's make Bob. And Bob is our friend who now can just work off of the shared repo, doesn't have to worry about my cat's stuff. So Bob's not necessarily going to have access to my stuff. Bob is going to have access to whatever is in the shared repo, which maybe I'm dealing with, maybe Alice is dealing with, who knows. Okay. So Bob is going to clone shared.git into their folder right here. Question. I like desktop version. It simplifies the interface. I completely agree. Sometimes the reason you might not want to use GitHub Desktop or any other kind of UI versions is if you're doing something like super complicated that doesn't exist in that particular UI. But for the majority of the part, I do enjoy that. Wasn't it changed to origin master instead of master? I think you might be asking about, which now I cannot scroll. I didn't know I couldn't scroll. When we were doing this one right here, branch master set to track remote branch from master from origin. So the branch is called master. Remember, origin is kind of the person. Origin is the source of truth, but you could also have Alice - master. So yes and no. How is it different from cloning a repo, checking out a branch, making edits, committing and pushing that branch, and then merging it? It is not. So this is a good question. We are basically doing that. We're cloning a repo. We're not necessarily checking out a new branch. We're just cloning it and staying on the main branch. We're making edits, committing and pushing to the main branch, and then asking to merge our changes into that main branch. Alternatively, what I think you're saying is that another way of doing this is by checking out a specific branch or creating a new branch, making edits, pushing that branch, and then asking to merge that branch in. We will talk about branches in a future stream, though. Right now, we're keeping it simple in the sense of like we're all just working on one main stream, which I agree, when you're in a real scenario, makes that not as simple because problems can arise, but that's why we'll kind of get to that point. And hello, Jim from Canada. Oh, that's what you're saying instead of master. Yes. Yes, I much prefer main. Thank you, Ms. Mero. I much prefer main as well. We are actually updating these docs to say main instead of master. That update just hasn't come through yet. And yes, GitHub is the one that set its default to main. You can actually set your main branch to any name that you want. We'll talk. I can show you how to do that in just normal terminal stuff, but like on GitHub, you can set it to any branch that you want, any name that you want. Okay, so Bob now has the cloned repo, okay? And Bob is already pointing to the shared.git repo. So, but Alice isn't yet. So let's make sure that Alice, we can just push up, is also going to set upstream to origin and specifying Git. Okay. In cats, we didn't have to do that because we set origin to shared.git. In this case, we're just saying, hey, origin is now, sorry. We are setting origin. I didn't read enough. So now we are saying, hey, origin used to be that cats repo. I need to reset. I need to set my URL to say origin is now this shared.git repo. Oops. What did I do wrong? I did -- set. And I did branch. Goodness. Why did I do that? All right, git remote. So I'm saying my remote one, that origin thing, that is now set to shared.git. Okay. Where are we so far? Well, we do know that the main branch for Alice now has the change background to light blue, and origin is still at add simple HTML. And I believe that's because now I lost track of where we were. We pulled in that to the branch, but then we did not actually commit that yet. So let's get back to that. Let's go into Bob. Okay. Is GitHub a separate entity from Git? Yes. GitHub is built on top of Git, but GitHub is basically just a place to host all of your code and adds additional features to it. That's a great question. --bear, basically it's just stating that this is not a working tree. This is not where code changes will happen. This is just where I'm keeping track of everything. Perfect. Okay. So now we're inside of Bob. We're going to configure Bob. User.name Bob. Git config. User.email bob@contoso. And Bob is going to go ahead and make some changes. Bob goes into index.html and he's going to add a footer after the body. All right. And then Bob's just going to go for it. Put a footer at the bottom. All right. And then Bob's just going to push. They're like, you know what? Done pushing it. All good. Now we're going to go to Alice. And Alice is going to go into index.html. Notice Alice does not have the footer, right? Bob pushed it to shared. That's where Bob's upstream is. Alice has not pulled from shared, so Alice does not have the footer. But what Alice wants to do is go ahead and add in this navigation bar. Okay. And then Alice is also going to go into here and add in some coloring for it. Now, this is, someone was mentioning this in the chat earlier, like, what is the process? So the best process is you're going to write some code. Do a git pull first, okay? Make sure that what you currently have on your machine is the most up-to-date thing that exists on that shared repo, okay? So do a git pull first, number one. Then you make your changes. Unlike Bob, what you should do first is do a git pull before you start to, before you do your commits and pushes and all of that, okay? So right now what happened was Alice did not do a git pull before she started making her changes. So Alice and Bob are both kind of a little sus here. So now she's like, okay, I'm about to do my git pull. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Hey, 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 don't do that. You can't do that, because if you do that, if you pull, then what you just changed in index.html by adding that nav bar is going to be replaced, because I'm not that smart. I'm not going to like figure out what goes where. You just need to figure this out. I need you to commit your changes or stash them before you continue. Okay. So this is, we can check that out just to kind of make sure that we know what's going on. --index.html. Okay. So this is basically showing that what is up on, what will happen if we attempt to do this pull is that this is going to be removed and this is going to be added. It's not necessarily what we want to do though. So what Alice is going to do is say, okay, no worries. I'm just going to stash my current changes. So everything that Alice was working on, we're just going to stash that over to the side for a second. Now, Alice is going to pull. If we opened up index.html now, Alice now has the footer, and her changes where she added that nav have been stashed. They're not there right now. Okay. Now, Alice can do a git stash pop, which basically brings those changes back into her working tree, into her working directory, and says, okay, Great. I know how to do this. I know what changes just happened. We're good. Now, if we were to open up index.html, we can see that both changes are there. We've got our footer. We've got our nav. Okay. Let's go ahead. Alice is like, okay, that's great. But since Bob went ahead and added that footer, I want to make sure that this has styling for the footer as well. So now Alice is ready. Go ahead and do a git commit, stylize the nav bar. I'm going to say and footer. Git push. We're good to go. Git log -- one line. Oops. Shows that everything is the same. So her version and the origins all same with the nav bar and the footer. If we go into cats, if we do a git log -- one line, we can see that that looks the same, but it's the changing the color to light blue, not the footer stuff. So we need to do a git pull. Now we do have all of that stuff. I don't know why this is saying that. That's weird. I need to look into that. And if we were to open up index.html, we can see that we've got both Alice's and Bob's changes. And similarly, we should probably go into Bob and do a git pull. Make sure that Bob is also up to date. Git log -- one line. Okay. Can you elaborate more on how Git Stash works? Yeah. So basically, if you have not, so if you've made some changes and you have not committed those changes, you have not said, hey, my local Git, know that these changes are kind of like things that I want to do, and you need to pull some stuff down, Git Stash is basically going to take all of the changes since the last commit or pull or whatever, basically like this, since the last time you've like told Git to save a version. It's going to take all of those and it's just going to stash them to the side. So it doesn't delete them. They're still there, but to Git's point of view, it's going to ignore them for a bit. That allows you to kind of clean up your repository. And then when you do that git stash pop, you can bring those changes back into your working tree or your working directory, and then you can figure out what you want to do next. Great question. Okay, and then the last couple things that you can do if you wanted to is you can zip up the cats repository and download it to actually see your index.html. All right, we've got just like a couple of seconds left. I did want to mention that we do have a survey. Please fill it out. It helps us to make sure that we are delivering content that might be interesting to you and that you might care about. So I encourage you to fill it out. It's just at aka.ms/reactor-survey. And the code for this event is 12537 right here. And then also, as a reminder, I do have this entire series as a playlist up on YouTube. So you can head over to aka.ms/learnwithdrg/WYDLIS_videos, where I will be adding, as we do this over the next actually couple of months, I will be adding additional videos to this. And finally, as always, please, if you would like to, you can engage with me on Twitter if you want to ask some additional questions or follow-ups, and I'd happily chat with you there. Do you have any tips on GitHub issues, projects, or other collaborative parts of Git? I'm starting up a GitHub project. Yes, we are going to be doing a bunch of GitHub stuff in the next, or in the like 2 or 3 streams. I do have on my GitHub repo, github.com/Dr. Guthels. There's a streaming schedule I try to keep up to date so you can see what topics are coming up, and so you can check that out. I know my show is only an hour, so I do have to run now to allow time for the next one, but I will be doing some streaming on my own where we can continue these conversations. So follow me on Twitter for more. Bye, everyone.